Dan the Wheelman here, and with me today is this. This is the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. Now, those last two letters are important because they mean this is the performance version of the Mach-E. It's got the most power of any of the models in the lineup, and it's got the styling to back it up. In addition to all the classic Mach-E styling cues, like the progressive turn indicators, and the coupe crossover-like styling, this one sits lower, has a great yellow paint job, awesome wheels, wider tires, cool front splitter, and what looks like an actual grille here, even though there's no engine there to cool it, it's just a panel. But the result is a car that looks the most Mustang of any of the Mach-Es. But can we call it a performance EV or a performance EV crossover? Well, we're going to take a drive in and around rainy Vancouver today to try to find out. So, stepping inside the Mach-E, this big 50.5-inch screen here, obviously that's a bit of a shot at, obviously, but you could say that's a bit of a shot at Tesla. They're all known for that massive screen they have in there. This is where you find your Apple CarPlay, as you can see. This is where you have your trip computer information, and then your backup camera, and all that kind of, there's your trip computer coming up right there, and all that kind of good stuff. And there's some cool little Easter eggs too. If you hit this button up here, the car kind of comes out at you, kind of cool. And that this is where you select your drive modes, your auto parking, your one pedal driving, which will take you all the way down to 0 in slow traffic. As soon as you release the throttle, never have to hit the brake, and it regens while it's doing that, so that's great. And then when you close this, the car backs up again. Pretty cool stuff. So this is a massive display, very responsive, and I rather like it. The gauge cluster is a different story. It's also a digital display, but it's tiny. I have no idea how big it is, but it's small, but at least it's small, and it makes sure it fits within the space here of your steering wheel, above the steering wheel hub, so you can more easily see it. Wireless charging down here, dial style shifter, but a pretty simple interior. Not a lot going on here. You got your, your requisite storage and cup holders and all that, but pretty kind of basic. But it's got some cool stuff that I rather like. This nylon material is kind of cool. It's got a cool feel to it, and it helps reduce glare. You've got some faux carbon fiber look stuff as well. I've seen that before in the Mustang sports car, which I also think is kind of cool, and it's comfortable enough. These are the specialized sports seats the GT gets, which, better side bolstering. They hold you on your shoulders and around your ribs, so that's nice too, especially as the going gets a little bendier. I guess the one thing I'd ask for, and this is more of kind of aesthetic thing, I guess, is, the Mustang sports car has the Mustang plaque up here. It says since 1964 and all that kind of stuff. And I'd like to see a little more specialization for the GT version over other Mach-Es, I guess. This is the performance model of the lineup. This, some would say, is what the Mustang or anything named Mustang should always be, the performance option. So maybe something a little more focused on that, but that's a pretty big nitpick. I've also got B&O audio, which is great, really nice in here, and roomy and airy too, with this big, huge panoramic glass roof. Doesn't open, unfortunately, but it is nice to brighten up both the front and the back seats, which, speaking of those back seats, let's go have a look at them. So, not bad back here. This seat is pretty far back on its rails. I'm a tall driver. Leg room's not really a problem. My knees aren't too high up. They're not banging into the seat back here, which is good because it's kind of a plasticky, rubbery, stretchy material. Not the softest material, not the hardest either, but it's kind of a weird, I don't know what it is actually. Anyway, I've got a USB-C and USB-A port back here. I don't have heated seats back here. Unfortunately, if they got a car that costs around 85 grand, as this does, you'd have something like that. But I do have cup holders that are flush mounted, so if you're not using them for a drink, they're more comfortable to use as an armrest. And pretty good headroom too. My head's not banging into the headliner of this, or the moonroof, I should say. There's not really any headliner here at all. And the bill of my cap clears it, which I like. All the test I do. Seats back here are a little flat. The bottom seat cushions are a little flat, which I guess if I was backseat passenger on a windier road, I'd be moving around a little bit, and that's too bad. But what it does do is it makes child seats easier to mount, and B, it makes the seat back easier to fold. Button on the shoulder, comes down, nice and flat. And that's important because with that steeply raked rear window, there isn't a lot of room to store stuff high in the rear cargo area, so you're better off to store longer items this way, so tilt stuff on the side if you have to, and that's made much easier by this nice fold flat seat back. Quick note about the hat. This is a University of Michigan Wolverines hat, and I'm wearing it because this Ford Mustang, like all other Ford Mustangs, is built in Detroit or in Michigan, right? Well, no, it's not. It's built in Mexico, but Mexico does start with an M, so that still applies. Not to mention Mustang starts with an M, and this M pretty much perfectly matches the exterior color of this Mach-E. So Michigan Wolverines it is. Plus, I just really like this hat. So this is the GT model of the Mach-E, and those two letters speak volumes. They mean, or they signify, that this is the most powerful Mach-E in the lineup, with 480 horsepower and 635 pound-feet of torque. That's more power than a Porsche Boxster 718. That's more power than the Mustang GT 5-liter, I believe. And crucially, that's more power than the Tesla Model Y, which this will inevitably be compared with. I don't think there's any comparison. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's just the way it is. It's going to cost you. This GT version starts at like 85 grand in Canada, thereabouts. Add a couple of options and you're up towards 90. You're pushing 90. That's a lot for what is essentially it's not really a luxury crossover, is it? It's kind of a small or compact crossover luxury plus, maybe. But it's not inexpensive, but you get great power. But as is often the case in the EV world, most power does not necessarily mean most range, and this one here is rated for about 415 kilometers. That puts it like 4th on the list among all Mach-Es and 3rd on the list among the all-wheel drive versions. The two-wheel drive versions tend to have, or they tend to get more range than these do, so there you have it. So it doesn't have a huge amount of range. I'm starting here with 91% battery charge and 326 kilometers. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to drive it through the city, into the mountains, and a couple other spots as well. We'll see, by the end of it all, how realistic this range predictor is. That being said, though, it does come with DC fast charging, which I believe will get you from like 5 to 80% or something in around half an hour on a DC fast charger. So that's good. And of course, with the wall box at home, you're looking at probably a 7-hour full charge thereabouts. So there's that for peace of mind. And of course, more and more fast charge spots are becoming available in Canada and the US and all over the world, I think, every day. So in addition to all that power, the GT gets all sorts of other cool stuff. It gets specially tuned steering. It gets self-adjusting adaptive dampers. It gets Brembo brakes painted red, which I think is kind of cool. Special wheels, wider tires, special interior seats, as we talked about in the interior portion of this video. So it's a pretty comprehensive makeover, and the biggest part of it, or the most visible obviously, is what we talked about before in the intro, is that grille that actually looks like a grille on the GT. Most Mach-Es, it's color matched to the rest of the body. So what does all that mean in practice? Those power figures, 91 kilowatt hour battery and all that kind of stuff. Well, it means that, especially in unbridled drive mode, which is the sport equivalent, they call it unbridled Mustang, get it? Okay, whatever. It's fast, really fast. Car and Driver clocked this 0 to 60 miles an hour in like 3.8 seconds. Those are Mustang Shelby GT350 numbers. 3.8 seconds. That is crazy. And as you saw there, that just quick little burst acceleration, you got to hold on in this vehicle. It is a fast car. You know, there's no joke. I know it weighs over 200 or 2,200 kilograms, but still, with all that power, with 600 plus pound-feet of torque, well, that weight is neutralized pretty quickly when it comes to the straight shots. We're going to take a couple of turns up here later, which I think will probably be fine, because you've got the adaptive dampers, you've got the special tires, and since this is an EV, it's got an inherently lower center of gravity than others, because all of that heavy battery, all of that running gear is packed deep into the floor, bringing the COG down, which helps reduce body roll, dive, squat, more comfortable for drivers and passengers, and safer as well. So I'm looking forward to putting this on bendy roads. I mean, just zipping in out of traffic, as I've been doing over the last couple of days, you can really feel the agility of this vehicle. Zipping through responsibly, I should say, or I grant you. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what this is like on the twistier parts of the drive I'm going to go on, with that heavier steering, the special tires, and all that kind of stuff. Plus, you know, we talked before about the looks. This thing is turning heads everywhere. I had somebody in a yellow Chrysler Crossfire convertible, believe it or not, pull up beside me, roll down his window, and give me a few, you know, just a couple of quick questions, what I think of it, and so on. And that is not something that happens all the time. I've driven quite a few head-turning performance vehicles, Dodge Charger Hellcats, Porsche 911s, Boxsters, big SUV, all sorts of stuff. This one here has been turning quite a few heads in its own right. With a color this bright, what do you expect? Which, by the way, is the color I'd probably get for this Mustang Mach-E. The only other vehicle I think in the lineup, I don't know if it's the only other vehicle in the Ford lineup that gets the color option, but I think it's the only other vehicle where this color option really works, or vehicles, I should say, is the Mustang sports car and the Ford Bronco, actually. So, you know, it's a color that looks good on kind of more avant-garde styling exercises like the Mach-E, like the Mustang, or like the Bronco. Which brings me a little bit to what I was talking about before, how that guy pulled me over and asked about me. How many Tesla drivers in their gray or white Model Ys or Model 3s, because gray or white are the only, I just drove by 3 just now, God. They're the only colors I think in the Tesla world that don't cost you ridiculous amounts of money to get. How many of them are getting stopped by people in Chrysler convertible sports cars asking what they think of their car? Now, maybe people that drive Teslas, maybe they don't want that, but they're so boring to look at. This is a head turner. It's fun to look at. It's fun to consider from every angle. It looks cool. And while we were all a little bit up in arms when it was announced that the new Ford EV was going to be called Mustang, they've done what they can to make it look as Mustang-like as possible. And it's so unique in that way, so much more than a Tesla is. I mean, yeah, those are popular cars, but I know that when I like parking my car, locking it, and having a quick look over my shoulder as I walk away, just to check it out one more time. I don't see myself doing that with a gray Model 3. Let's be honest, I don't think that's going to happen. And it's just nice. It's just, nice that there's an option. I mean, Tesla has kind of had the run of the mill of the segment, especially at this price level, for as long as I can remember anyway. And now Ford has come out and said, lie in the sand. We've been making cool cars for like a million years, and we could do it. We can make something cool in the EV world as well. And so they have with this. Before we get to the fun stuff, we have to talk about the responsible stuff, safety features, drive range, and so on. There's a good amount of them here. I've got blind spot system, I've got lane keep assist, I've got adaptive cruise control, but I've got a bit of an ace up my sleeve as well with this Mach-E GT, and that's Ford's Blue Cruise autonomous tech. Basically, if you're on an appropriate road, by that I mean a divided highway with no level crossings, you can activate Blue Cruise, and it's done simply by first turning on your lane keep assist system, done by a simple button press of this handy button here on the wheel, and then you hit cruise, and you will get a message eventually. If it's ready, it'll tell you Blue Cruise is active, keep your eyes on the road, and it will watch you keep your eyes on the road because it's got a camera right here, so it'll know if you're trying to fool it and read a newspaper on your way to work or watch the latest episode of Winning Time on your way to work. It's gonna go, all right, hands back on the wheel, I'm turning this thing off. It's kind of like when your dad used to say, kids, stop fighting, or I'm gonna turn this car around. This is Ford's way of saying, I'm gonna turn this car around. So now I'm in, as you can see, hands-free, foot-free driving. All I gotta do is keep my eyes ahead and we're good to go. The only thing is, if the turns get too extreme, it will tell you to put your hands back on the wheel, and that's fine, but I was surprised to see it's telling me to do it right now. I was surprised to see how quickly it asked me to do that. This turn I'm going around now is not that harsh of a turn, and I'm fairly certain I've driven other semi-autonomous vehicles on this road before, all through this turn where they haven't told me to put my hands back on the wheel. So, you know, I was a little bit surprised at that. And the other thing it won't do is it will not, I'm going to deactivate it here because we're in traffic, but it will not, although I could be in traffic and cruise, it's got cruise to 0, so whatever, but it will not change lanes for you, and it won't leave the highway for you like the GM's Super Cruise system can do. So it won't do that, but it will do all the rest of the stuff if you're on an appropriate road. I should say, in addition with giving you quicker throttle response and different steering feel and all that, unbridled mode also augments the sound the Mach-E makes, which isn't really a sound at all, but it's a digitally kind of fabricated one, kind of like what Porsche does with the Taycan. Have a listen. It's kind of like a futuristic exhaust note is probably the best way to put it. You can hear some undertones of, you know, sports car in there, but then you just get that kind of spacey or space age feeling on the at the higher end there as well. So I kind of like that. Of course, you can switch that off. It's called propulsion sound, whatever. You can turn that off if you want, but I'm gonna leave it on. I kind of like where the rubber really meets the road. We're finally on a road with some proper turns on it here. This is, I think, where we're really gonna see if this Mach-E GT can cut the mustard as a performance vehicle. First impressions are pretty good as I move through my first couple of turns here. Steering response is good, although I'm having to put a little more lock on than I expect to have to do. I've driven this road many times in many other performance vehicles, and you do have to turn it a little more, even in unbridled mode, which is what I'm in now with my propulsion set. A little more lock is required for turn-in than I thought. There is some nice feel through the wheel. I wouldn't call it granular by any means, but through my hands here, I do know what's going. I have a fair idea of what's going on underneath these big fat Pirelli P0 tires I have here. And as we move through, those brakes are quite responsive. Of course, as is the case with EVs, the first few millimeters, I believe, of travel, or the first little bit of pedal travel is reserved for regen. Then the mechanical brakes get applied after that, I believe. So you got to push it, give it a little more pressure than you otherwise would. But I felt the same thing when I tested the Porsche Taycan on the racetrack, actually. And so it's not just the fault of, or this isn't just an issue with the Mach-E. So yeah, a little more turn of the wheel. I'm not as confident in what the front end is doing as I might otherwise like, or would have expected from such a firm setup. And it is a firm setup. There's very little body roll at all. I do not get the sense that I'm in what is essentially a fairly tall crossover. It's that all that weight slung down low. Those great dampers are really keeping everything nicely in check through here. And that's great. Of course, every time you come out of a turn, as I'm about to do here, you get that nice slug, well, pretty good slug of acceleration. As speeds get a little higher, it does run out of puff a little bit. That's what the way it is with EVs. You don't have the benefit of a transmission to kind of give you that extra oomph on downshifts and stuff. You can't do any of that here, so you're having to use your throttle a little more. And of course, having no transmission to work with means you got to kind of readjust how you're driving through these bends, especially since I'm so familiar with this road. I know that normally I'd be downshifting here and then braking and so on. But here you're doing a lot more work with your eyes. You don't have as much information through your hands, through a shift lever and so on, or through your ears, through what the transmission is doing. So you have to use your eyes a little more. I find myself having to apply brakes a little more firmly than otherwise expected, because brakes are you have to apply the brakes a little earlier in this Mach-E GT. As I said before, it weighs over 2,200 kilos, so it's not necessarily a light vehicle. But I really do like how well the body is being kept in check through these turns. That is incredibly impressive. You really don't. Oh, I guess I hadn't clipped my seats together properly. It just flopped down. Anyway, so yeah, you really get some good planted feel. Plus the tires are super grippy. You're not going to unseat these things. That's for sure. I've got quite a bit of nose in front of me here. Not this nose, that nose. And that means the front axle is a little further away. It's going to be, there's a little more of a delay from turn into response. That's one of the big takeaways. And the big takeaway, though, is just how planted it is and how it's keeping up pace, keeping speed without too much trouble. So just pulling up to the Electrify Canada charge station here in Squamish, British Columbia. I just want to give you guys a quick range update. As I said before, I started this drive with 326 kilometers on my computer here. I've since driven about 146 kilometers, 145.8, but I'm only left with 146 kilometers on my range. I should be left with more like 180 kilometers left, considering how much I've driven. So what I'm looking at here is about a 30 kilometer discrepancy. Now, of course, a lot of this has to be known that a lot of this drive was done on, or it should be known, I should say, that a lot of this drive was done on hills, kind of inclement weather. I was using the climate control system, and then in the last few minutes, as you saw, I was driving somewhat enthusiastically, which is going to have an effect on your range. So just to give you guys kind of a picture, after all that, and by the way, I've got 46% battery left. I started with 91%. So just to give you guys kind of a picture of where we're at with the range on this, I'm just going to plug in here to a DC fast charger and charge it up and be on my way. So where does that leave the Mach-E GT then? We started this, I guess, adventure wondering, does it qualify? Will it qualify as a performance EV? And with that kind of power and that kind of handling, which is mostly really good, you know, adaptive dampers, all that, except for a couple of the steering issues I talked about, it absolutely does qualify as a performance EV, crossover or otherwise. Especially when you consider the competition from the likes of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 or the Kia EV6, Volvo C40 Recharge, XC40 Recharge, Tesla Model Y, if you must. This is way more performance oriented than all of those. And when I drove the Ioniq 5, I was really impressed with it. I didn't think I would so quickly find another EV that drove quite as well as it does, but here we are with the Mach-E. So I would say for sure it does, especially with that price tag too. I mean, about 85 grand, knocking on the door of 90 with all the options that I've got here. Those are performance EV numbers, if we're honest. Like, they fully are. And so there you have it. Of course, there's some people out there still willing to pay a premium for EV power, but there's more and more options out there these days, and I think people are going to still be thinking twice when dropping 90 grand on something like this. But the question I'm asking now, and maybe should have been asking at the beginning of this video, was, does it qualify as a Mustang? The Mustang is not just a car, it is a lifestyle. It is a cultural icon, and putting that name on something is a big deal. And when Ford introduced the Mach-E Mustang couple years ago, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, Mustang's a big name. Mach in the Mustang world is a big name. So to put those two together was a kind of a startling move. And in a traditional sense, no, I wouldn't say this qualifies as a Mustang necessarily. It doesn't have two doors, doesn't have a long hood, doesn't have rear wheel drive. Well, not this version anyway. So you know, probably not. But it does have the performance, and one of the big pillars of the Mustang name, of course, is performance. So it does have that, especially in GT form. But I don't mean to say that the Mach-E isn't worthy as a performance Ford. In fact, the more I thought about this, it's actually not the Mustang coupe I thought of. Another performance Ford I thought of as I drove this was actually the dearly departed and sadly missed Ford Focus RS, which you of course can't buy new anymore. Actually, you can't buy a Focus at all anymore in Canada, so there you go. But was the Ford Focus RS. I know, sounds weird, right? But listen for a second. Like that vehicle, this has all-wheel drive. Like that vehicle, this has very boy racer styling. Like that vehicle, this has quite a lot of power for its size. And like that vehicle has a much higher, much taller and a more upright seating position than the Mustang coupe or convertible does. And of course, this has a hatchback, just like the Focus RS did. That's the one that I've actually been thinking more about the more I drove this. That's the one I think I'm being reminded the most about, which is kind of surprising. And in my opinion, that connection means this deserves its spot in the Ford Performance canon. Ford Performance, the same nameplate attached to the likes of the Ford F-150 Raptor or the Ford Mustang or, yeah, the Ford GT. This does belong in that canon, in my opinion, and that is a pretty good. That's a big deal. That's job well done. If Ford was hoping to take this GT and take the Mach-E to the performance level, to be thought of on the same level as other performance Fords of the past, then I think they've achieved that goal. This deserves to be there. It's a fun little car. It's a really fun little car, and it puts a smile on my face. And that's kind of the idea with a vehicle like this. Anyway, thank you for tuning into this video of the Ford Mustang Mach-E. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. If not, no hard feelings, of course. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan the Wheelman or on Instagram at Dan the Wheelman as well. So thanks again for tuning into this video. Until next time, sayonara, folks.